good energy-wise. I ain't gonna think about that quick. All right. How you feeling?
I'm good, man. How about yourself?
Good, man. It's been a good month so far. I appreciate you for doing this with me. A little introduction. So this is my brother, Mr. Johnny No Good, KNO, No Good.
Yes, sir. Peace, peace. How y'all doing, people? Johnny No Good, born and raised Omaha, Nebraska. Just out here on this journey of self-discovery. And I appreciate my brother Mike for inviting me on this platform and on this podcast today.
Amen, amen. So today, the meeting between me and Johnny came about because we wanted to figure out what kind of topic that we want to do for our podcast, for our episode. And he shared this article with me, and it was basically kind of going over the influence that the First Nations had, specifically the Blackfoot and the Siksika Nation, had on Maslow as he was conducting his research for his theory of motivation. So he shared that with me, and it was a lot. Taught me a lot about how I look at individuality compared to being growing up in the United States, but also like how a true community looks at like individuality compared to if you ever get a chance, check out Maslow's social hierarchy of needs. You can kind of look at the different tiers that they have, but we're going to be talking about just some of the things that we found, we'll say that kind of touched us, and so but what was your opinion of the article?
I mean, first off, shout out to my brother, Tyler Payne. That's a phenomenal brother, but he was the one who sent me the article, I believe, back in like April.
Okay.
He knew I had been looking at creating some curriculum to help our young black men.
Yep.
I'm in the intersections of art education and urban ag, and one thing that I noticed is that I always had a profound love of reading. When I was in the 4th grade, I would read chapter books like A Painted House by John Grisham. And one thing that I noticed is that in 3rd grade, a phenomenal shift happens in the minds of the average kid is you go from learning how to read to reading to learn. And so upon reading to learn and having a thirst for knowledge, my brother Tyler Payne was helping me compound this curriculum for this program to help address some of the lack of cultural representation in the learning materials our students is experiencing, which is a direct effect to interest or lack of interest and motivation in the participation of school systems. And so this hierarchy of needs article that he sent me was to help reinforce the fact that in the black communities and the communities of indigenous peoples, we don't have an individualistic mindset. We have more of a communal mindset. And I think that the biggest thing that stood out to me is that for peoples of indigenous nations, self-actualization isn't the top of the pyramid or quote-unquote pyramid or TP or whatever we want to call it, but cultural perpetuation is. Not even community actualization is the top, but cultural perpetuation. How are we able to perpetuate the culture, preserve it, and adhere to it in this day and age? And I think that was the most critical thing that stood out to me.
Okay, I love that. No, that's true. It's like, with you said you were learning. You said again. You said learn to read, read to learn.
Yeah. So in the 3rd grade is when the average person is going and making that shift from learning how to read to reading to learn.
The article, it kind of talks with everything that my brother just shared. It goes into how it's more or less kind of a contrast of what Maslow thought was, the hierarchy of needs. And if you look at it, I'll post something. I'll post a pyramid at some point in the video so you can see it. But there's only 3 tiers in the pyramid for the First Nations. It's first, self-actualization, standing at the bottom. Then you have community actualization, and then you have cultural. Can never say that word. Cultural perpetuity. If I'm saying it wrong, oh well, it's all good. Yeah, and so what surprised me about the article was about self-actualization, but how they defined it compared to how Maslow came. Okay, so like a little background story. Maslow, when he was 30 years old, he went to go stay with the Siksika Nation for about 6 weeks, and so during that time, he was more or less, conducting research, trying to figure out what he wanted to do. But during that time period, he came across, some milestones about, how he looked at his own self and his own culture that he was coming from, And so when you're entering a First Nation, like within the United States, it's almost like you're entering a new country, new values, new, perspectives, new customs. And so he was going into that environment as a foreigner, more or less within his own country, and, seeing things from a perspective of the First Nations. And so one of the first things that he realized was, no one was trying to dominate anybody. That was the first thing. And dominance more or less comes from an insecurity of something. It could be from lack of food, lack of self-esteem, lack of safety, security, your basic needs. And so that was the first thing that he noticed, that there was no one who was trying to dominate anyone, trying to control them. With the, I want to say the theory of universality. I think that's what it's called. They is basically saying that dominance is more or less what controls social hierarchies. And so he came in there with that mindset, and it was like, oh, okay, so you guys don't do this. And so what he found is the people who had the most power, the people who had the most wealth, the wealth was based off of generosity. It was amazing to kind of just see how everything was just kind of debunked, like the way he thought, and how he more or less had to adopt and look at things from a different perspective. But he came in vulnerable. He did come in vulnerable. He didn't try to take over. He was sitting there, taking it all in. And so, I'm not sure if you felt the same way when he said that.
Oh, yeah, no, definitely. I thought that was very powerful. But also, to expound upon it a little bit bigger, was him pointing to specific instances that create the culture of dominance, or the lack of factors that's present that don't have that culture of dominance, and it being a communal place, like you said, that where the measure of wealth was about how much you could give away. The wealthiest people in the harvest seasons would give away everything that they got to the less fortunate. So there was always a communal responsibility to other people not doing their part. So it wasn't individualistic in nature. There wasn't competition. There's an African proverb that says, he who holds me to the ground holds himself to the ground. And I'm paraphrasing. It's basically saying that whatever you do unto another person ultimately comes back to you. I think what really stood out to me was their definition of what poverty was, and how poverty was a concept that didn't exist. And the closest translation to poverty was he without family. And that was very, very critical to me, is to show that in First Nation tribes and indigenous tribes, communal tribes, places that are built more off of a communal mindset, there is no such thing as poverty, because those who have more look out for those who have less. And so those are the type of things that really hit a core with me, especially as we live in more of a capitalistic country with people with more of a capitalistic mindset, where it's more competition amongst each other, and it's stemming from a scarcity mindset. And I think that our ancestors and the people who have been here before us understood that there is an abundance, and that when you take, there's a African proverb that says that he who eats to fill his stomach is at the mercy of the days of the tree. So what that means is that he who eats simply just to eat is at the mercy of the days of the tree, but he who eats because he is hungry, and only because he's hungry, will actually be around to receive the benefits and the plentifulness and the fruits of that tree. But we can be a destructive force in nature. So I think it's about having a spirit of generosity, and a spirit that poverty is of a mindset of walking around in a scarcity mindset where there's abundance around us.
I love that. No, I mean, kind of going back to your point, saying in the Siksika language, they said that there is no word that equates to homelessness. It's basically someone who doesn't have a family. And from the times that I'm at stoplights, we've all been there, where we see somebody at a stoplight, they're sitting there, with their back against the pole, and it's like, in my mind, I'm wondering, okay, what can I give to them? I don't like to give people money. I like to give them food, nourishment, water, something like that, because they could go off and buy something that they shouldn't be buying. And so even though it's not my job to control them, but that's how I see it. But then thinking about myself in that situation, I can't think of a scenario where I don't have someone to go to. I'm very thankful for my community. I'm very fortunate for that. Whether it's my church community, whether it's my own, my close-knit community, all the different circles I'm a part of, I could think of somebody who, if I'm ever in that spot where I can't take care of myself, someone I hope is willing to open up. But, for those who are in that situation, I always wonder, how can you be without any sort of family? Whether, it doesn't have to be blood. It could be friends, it could be somebody you went to school with, used to work with, and it could be, because of our mindset of, we want to be so independent that we take care of ourselves.
Mental health issues play a big part in homelessness. That sometimes there's people around that try to provide resources and help, but the individual person has to be willing to receive that help and able to receive that help. And I think that also too, we can't just dissuade the finger from like the effects of capitalism and having a place that, I mean, it's interesting to me to see a place where billionaires could have a race to space, yet we still starving. I just don't understand how certain conditions are perpetuated. I'm sitting here reading a book right now on Fannie Lou Hamer, and it's based off of a civil rights activist from the 50s and the 60s, and she was very prominent in organizing of voters' rights. And the same things that she's talking about then, the same conditions she's talking about then, the same disparities that was being perpetuated on a systemic level then, and some of the same issues that's being perpetuated now. And it's like, if we look at the overall condition of a problem, and if we look at that problem from 1850, and we look at that problem at 1890, and we look at that problem at 1960, and we look at that same problem at 2021, and if there's some semblance of that same problem, we got to look at what solutions are we using. And I think it goes back to Paulo Freire, Pedagogy of the Oppressed, and understanding that any tools presented to us by the systems or places that's oppressing us can only further oppress us. So what are we doing that's different outside of the things being provided to us to actually bring about tangible, measurable solutions? And those are the type of things that I think about, when I start just looking at the things that's around us, some of the issues that's around us, and looking at the bigger picture of how these things exist.
Exactly. And then kind of going back to the foundation of that, which is, your need to be recognized, your need, for esteem, your need for your basic needs to be covered. And, with the self-actualization standing at the bottom as a foundation, you start from a place where you actually feel secure, and you have enough, you're not self-deprecating yourself because everyone else is recognizing you. They're, they respect you. They treat you as if you have value. And so kind of going back to, kind of jumping on that, how the First Nations look at self-actualization. So Maslow came in more or less saying that, self-actualization is something that you have to earn. You have to go out, get it. It's more or less like a degree. And so imagine when you have a degree, what's the difference between someone who has a degree and someone who doesn't? The person who has a degree, they're treated with more respect. They're looked at more highly. They're more likely to get, some type of opportunities within the community. And they, have a sense of self-worth. And so for the, on the contrary, the Blackfoot, the Siksika, they believe that when you come into this earth, you are self-actualized. This is something that everyone, no matter who you are, when you come into this world, you are self-actualized. It's innate in everybody. And so I think if you start from that foundation and you have good self-esteem, you have a good sense of self-worth, all of your basic needs are met. And also jumping on the second level with community actualization, your community is, that's also your foundation as well, because they are supplying you with all your basic needs. They recognize you, they see you, they teach you, they look at you. They're not trying to criticize you in a way that puts you down, but only uplift you. And so I think, jumping on that, I think we could definitely, expound on that as well.
Oh, yeah, no, definitely. I think that was something that stood out to me as part of the communal people, is knowing that they would never publicly shame one of their other members, knowing that they have to be in close proximity with them for the long run. So I think it shows the difference, as opposed to more of an individualistic mindset or community where there's more competition, where you can oust in fights amongst each other. But if congruency is the ultimate goal, it's counterintuitive. And so I definitely love that. And I love what you were saying about as far as them starting with self-actualization as a base. I think self-actualization is a base. I think that innately we come into this world, but we get brought away from ourselves. And Paul Ferreira actually had another book. I believe it's called the Baking System of Education, and he's basically going into some of those same thoughts that you're compounding on, which is basically saying that the way that the education system looks at most kids is like they have to make a deposit. They look at kids as being deficits or lacking thereof, and they have to expand their knowledge and impart their knowledge onto the children, as opposed to take an approach where you're mining the riches that's already innate within that child. And so I think that that's the next step of education that we're missing, is more of an individualistic approach to education, but an approach where you're looking at the potential of the child. It starts with, what's the potential you see of the child that you're dealing with? If you have low expectations, or if you have low expectations of ability to complete certain things, then you're going to treat that child in such a way. And I've seen it firsthand, close hand, done plenty of studies, and even looking at the Reggio Emilia approach based out of in Italy, where they look at each student as being rich in potential. If we are looking at each member of society, each member of our communities as being rich in potential, then we're going to treat them as such and not demonize them when they make easily correctable mistakes.
That's beautiful. Wow. Now just imagine now if we took all this knowledge and then, not only the things that from Paulo Freire, some of the other people that you mentioned, but just the influence that, or we'll say the contribution that the First Nations could have on our society if we actually implemented, or at least tried to, put in some of those values, something as simple as starting with self-actualization. Like what difference that will make in the people, because we have a lot of people who are insecure, we can't even make eye contact with people because we're so afraid of, I gotta fight you, it's like, it's almost like a battle every day. You walking by somebody, you look around your shoulder because you know if they're gonna do something to you. It's always this insecurity in something. Dominance. You have to be dominant and more or less to cover your insecurity, to more or less protect you. So I always wonder, if we didn't have that need, if we more or less, got together, established these what's it called? These lower tier foundations, such as self-actualization, then building into community actualization, the difference that it would make in our mindset, in our thinking, our mental health, the way we treat people, the way we look at everyone, how we also treat place, look at, the area that we're inhabiting. I'm pretty sure it'd be a good thing.
Yeah, definitely, man. I think that you hit it right on the head as far as like illuminating what's the importance of place too. Because I think that was something that article highlighted, is that Maslow had missed that. And Maslow also did a paper too, basically expounding on the weaknesses of the self-actualization and like what were some of the inadequacies of it. And he mentioned that he failed to take into effect place and circumstance, like as far as like position on social factors, like poverty and aspects like that. So social conditions is also something that he failed to take into mention. But I also think it's worth noting that that Maslow never constructed, or they say he never constructed, the hierarchy of needs itself. He just had certain talking points, and people kind of constructed that into a hierarchy or a pyramid. So I think that's worthy of noting out there as well.
For sure. Yeah, but also one thing to mention also was that afterwards there was actually a paper that was published that actually was not published that Maslow wrote, basically kind of coming back after some time, after he created his theory of motivation, and more or less kind of going back to self-actualization, saying that alone is not enough. There's more that you can contribute. Think about community. Think about when you were born into this world and how vulnerable you are, and the fact that literally for at least the first 5 years of your life, everything that you're getting is from your community, from your mother, from your daddy, from your grandma, from your grandpa, from your auntie, from your uncle, from this friend, from that friend, from the person who makes this at this place. Everyone's coming together to more or less, help you as you're here, new on arrival. And so just imagine if we took that same mindset for those who first come into this world, the first 5 years, and we apply it to just everyone, but like all the time. We don't stop just after the first 5 years. We keep it going. It's more or less the perpetuation, keeping that going.
No, I definitely agree with that, and I think that's important, is that ongoing support. Even right now, as somebody who's only 30 years old, and I remember when I was like 18 or 19, 30 sounded old. I'm constantly in the presence of my elders. I'm constantly in the presence of people who are 80 years old, who have been doing the type of things that I've been wanting to do for 40 plus years, people who have seen these type of things for 50 plus years, and it just gives you a perspective. And we always in need of that guidance. I think that one of the wisest things that we can ever come to realization of is the limitations of our own knowledge. And what I mean is that be wise enough to know that you don't know everything and be okay with that. Be a lifelong learner. And so I think that what you're saying as far as that continuing support of people beyond the first fundamental years, 5 to 7 years of age, I think that is critical. One of the aspects that I looked at as far as with literacy is the involvement of parents. So how are we personally developing parents? When I'm looking at the development of students, I'm looking at students, but I'm also looking at the development of teachers too, because there is a triangle that has to be fit in order for it to have a structural foundation. And so how are students, parents, and teachers working in congruency to learn the same lessons so that they can help reinstill the lessons that's being put out? So I think that these are the type of things that's critical, is making sure that there is a structure and a foundation around people so that we can be successful. It get hard.
True. Yeah, I mean, jumping onto your point, I realize, when you hear the word, "Oh, I can't wait till I'm grown," but it's like, there's no way you can be grown because you're always growing.
Yes, sir.
There's always going to be a need for you to elevate yourself in some way, shape, or form. You become. I mean, it's just like, let's say after you graduate college or high school, you stop reading, you stop working out. Let's say you stop walking. You have to more or less keep that going in order to sustain yourself, and not only sustain yourself, but just keep elevating. Why would you want to remain in the same spot forever? It's just like, let's say if you only stayed in a 1980s mindset and now it's 2020, you more what do you call it? It is now obsolete. The knowledge that you have, of course, you can't contribute to something, but at the same time, you also have to keep learning, keep elevating yourself, be able to adapt, and be vulnerable again.
Yes, sir. Adaptability is one of the separating factors from survival. So the ability to adapt and change with the variables and environments that you in is critical to survival. I mean, so one thing that I learned is that change is one of the only constants. Change is real. A lot of things that we think is real is not real on the absolute level. They only real on a relative level. Change is the only real. Time isn't a real thing. So I'm not gonna go too far off. That's a whole different subject. I know we're trying to keep it on the points, but just knowing that, what's real. And so embrace change. Learn to embrace it, because it's not going nowhere.
Nope.
And it's not your enemy. It's not your enemy. It's like you said earlier, being grown is a false ideology. We are continuously growing.
Right. Growing, shedding, like expanding, everything is always changing.
Yes, sir.
And change is the only thing that's constant, consistent.
Yes, sir.
And so, not to go too long, but, how has this article, or like the things that you read in here, morphed or altered how you, will say, look at life, or like how you make decisions, or, look at, we'll just say like our own community, our own, environment that we're part of right now?
It gives me the academia behind what I already believe. So it just gives me the references to point to somebody when I speak about the difference as us as black people, or different indigenous people, or people who are more communal as opposed to individualistic in nature. I've always had more of an altruistic mindset. It's always been about the people around me. How can I can't say it's always been like that. As far as ever since I've become into awareness unconsciously, I've always had a spirit about the people around me. I'm about justice. I'm a Libra. It's about the scales. And I went through a self-centered nature and a self-centered moment, but after enlightenment, it's always been about how can I help us win. Even when people ask me, what do? I say, I help people win. So it's about having that understanding that, one, that self-actualization is a part of it. Most people aren't self-actualized, but in order to be self-actualized in a communal standpoint collectively, that individualistic actualization has to occur. Then from the communal actualization, cultural perpetuation is however we want to put it, is that becomes the most paramount thing. Is now how can I advance my own thing? Now how can I transcend the flesh? Now how can I do that? But how can we as a people move forward? And I think one of the last things I want to hit on is the fact that in the Blackfoot Nation, they talk about the 7 generations.
Yep.
That they do things for 7 generations. And my elder Carl Tyler always talk about doing things for the 7 generations. But I like the Blackfoot Nation's aspect of the 7 generations because they go back in the past 7 generations of ancestors, how would they would move forward, and then they think proactively 7 generations, how will this affect my great grandkids, you know. So I think it's about having that understanding that we are not the sole recipients of the work that we do in this world. And I think that if more people understood that they are directly reaping what they sow and other people reap what you sow, maybe you'll take a little bit more responsibility in the actions, in the thoughts, in the ideas, and the words, and the things that we do out here.
I got nothing to add to that except, there we go. Well, for me personally, I would say that this is a lot. This makes me want to actually go and like learn, maybe even stay like a week or 2 weeks with the First Nations, just to get a taste of that lifestyle and like that communal living, and you know, to kind of like separate myself from like my own ego, you know, and not be so self-centered. I think like we think about ourselves too much, and you know, it's almost like you said, you know, you are more or less here to serve. So how can I more or less take away the need to even, you know, have a need to always be thinking about myself? You know, of course, you know, survival mode, you know, the culture that we are a part of and that we were conditioned, you know, to be a part of. But, you know, now it's like as I'm getting older and I'm kind of, you know, shedding off these layers of, you know, indoctrination that I've had, you know, from the time I was younger, it's like, all right, I think there's some other things I can learn from other people, you know.
I love that. And just to add to it real quick, I think it hits right on what you're talking about self. But the thing is, right, you got childish, which is childlike-ish. You got grayish, which is gray like bluish, which is blue-like, and selfish, which is like self, but it's not self. And so there's individual self, but I've always talked about the collective self. Even in Dragon Ball Z, you got people like Goku doing the spirit bomb, and he's gathering the energy from all of the universe, from the plants, from the birds, from his loved ones, from Krillins, from the planet itself. And I think that if we understand how the interconnectivity of everything in the universe, we'll understand that when we do for true self, everybody benefits. Selfish isn't self.
Ooh. That's a bar right there. All right. Well, I'm pretty sure we can keep going. We can figure out something else to jump back into.
Man. Hey, thank you, Mike. Man, you're going to have to invite me back, bro. I see the hat, you know, the education, indoctrination, you know. So
I got you.
Man, I'm definitely looking forward to this, and thank you for inviting me on your podcast and your platform, bro.
Hey, much love. I appreciate you for these gems and much more.
Yes, sir. Thank you, bro.
All right, y'all. Thanks for tuning in. Appreciate it. I'll see y'all on the next one.